welcome back to Apostles of Reason. If you're new here, we dive into deep questions involving religious and political topics. We cut through the fluff and we get right to the logic and reason behind the positions and views in order to provide logical and biblical answers to these topics. And today we're really going to take a look at the beginning of a video which was posted by Genetically Modified Skeptic, who is a popular atheist YouTuber. It's titled Calmly Destroying Christian Apologists with Science for an Hour. We're just going to focus on the beginning because I thought there's a really serious misunderstanding of Christian theology surrounding LGBTQ issues and sin specifically. And so I really want to drill down on sound Christian theology here surrounding these issues rather than focusing on debate tactics like excessive rhetoric. And so we're just going to let the clip play and provide some commentary in places that might need a clearer explanation.
So you have someone who's born heterosexual, bisexual, or homosexual. So why is there this thing where God would say, that's fine, but that's not fine. And he creates them knowingly like that. And then in the past, the church has said these people are mentally ill, they deserve to be, put in institutions, penalized, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I could go on and on about that. But my question is, why do you say that if I'm going to be a Christian again, then I need to repent from being LGBTQI+, and then accept this narrow version of the gospel? That to me is like conversion therapy, and the UN and all these other major medical organizations in the US and around the world have called that torture. So for you to stand here and to defend that, that's pretty messed up. What is your response to that?
This is a pertinent and powerful question for those who wish to understand Christianity in light of LGBT issues. Why would God demand for anyone to deny or totally suppress their sexual orientation when decades of research from reputable medical organizations shows that is not evidently possible, and that organized efforts to achieve that end are extremely harmful to LGBT people?
Before we even let Turek respond to this, I want to take a look at the statement that was specifically asked, which was why God created people knowing they would be gay, and also knowing that being gay is a sin. Why would he create them that way? So this statement that God creates people knowing they are gay from the outset is already up for dispute. So it's not a well-formulated question. It's begging the question. It's circular logic. Turek doesn't believe that God created people gay. And so that doesn't really work as a straightforward question. It's misunderstanding Christian theology. But if we do grant that people are born that way, and God, being omniscient, would know these people would be born that way, would that make God evil? Now, that's something we're going to get into shortly towards the end, but I wanted to quickly point out how this question really misunderstands the Christian worldview from the outset. Now, with the second question about past Christians supporting forced conversion and mental asylums for queer people, we can easily address this by saying that it is indeed inhumane treatment, and it's clearly not conducive to a positive outcome for those individuals, regardless of their indulgence in sexual sin. But we really need to hone in on the response that Skeptic gave at the very end right here, where he said, why would God demand someone deny or totally repress their sexual orientation? Okay, so to understand this claim and how to address it, we need to understand what the Christian teaching is for behaviors that are biologically or psychologically immutable. And that is if we grant that all cases of LGBTQ are born that way, which is another debate. But I'll steelman the position and grant that all LGBTQ people are born that way and have natural inclinations that way. First, you would have to address other biological and chemical impulses some have that are also immutable that would be considered morally questionable as well. So perhaps there are issues of chemistry in the brain or things that are hardwired in us that would make us more predisposed to being attracted to people of the same sex in certain cases. But even that doesn't prove as much as we might think, because we've seen studies that suggest people have a predisposition to alcoholism, or that if men have higher levels of testosterone, they may be more ambitious, or they may be more athletic, or they may also be more prone to promiscuity, or maybe more prone to anger. So there are all sorts of ways we can understand our bodies. And we don't want to have a kind of biological determinism that says how I act and how I feel is only the product of my genes or my chemistry or some hardwiring in the brain. But this would be an axiomatic difference between a Christian and an atheist, as many atheists would believe in determinism as an extension of their disbelief in God. So if we just think about it, if God doesn't exist, then free will is much less likely to exist. So the determinism likely comes after atheism. But if we just take a look at an example from psychology, anywhere from 1 to 4.5% of adults are psychopathic. Psychopathy is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses, lack of empathy, and poor behavioral controls, commonly resulting in persistent antisocial deviance and criminal behavior. It is thought to be caused by a combination of environment and genetic factors, but the genetic aspects preclude the environment. So psychopaths do not ever truly change their toxic behavior, regardless of environment or context. Any apparent changes in character are purely simulated and put on by the psychopath as a way of gaining or regaining someone's trust or for more effectively manipulating someone. So psychopathy is a personality disorder that cannot be significantly modified with temporary effort or will. And so this shows that psychopaths cannot change who they are at their core, and this is anywhere from 1.5 to 4% of the population. So should our solution be to allow psychopaths to engage in whatever behavior that they are predisposed to genetically? Is it immoral to attempt to change how psychopaths behave because of how they are acting on innate desires and impulses? People with psychopathy are responsible for anywhere from 30 to 40% of all violent crime in the United States. So clearly something should be done to achieve a different outcome for these individuals and their victims. People that believe they were born LGBTQ are not violent offenders, of course, in most cases, but they believe the same thing about themselves, which is proven to be mostly true about psychopaths, which is that they were born that way. So this would show that having a natural inclination for a behavior does not make it morally permissible simply because it is a natural impulse. Most men have a natural impulse to impregnate as many women as possible in order to ensure their genes survive, but that is also not morally permissible according to Christianity. And so if we just go to scripture here, we can also support this with Matthew 10:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, quote, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Jesus tells us to deny ourselves and our fleshly desires in order to follow him. The Bible teaches consistently that all humans are sinful and fall short of the glory of God. And people have burdens to carry, different burdens in a lot of cases. Some people have different natural inclinations that lead them to be more predisposed to other behaviors that Christianity would deem immoral. And that is the reality according to Christianity. I do not believe that most LGBTQ people were born that way. But even for those that might have been born that way, the Lord tells us to deny our fleshly desires and follow him, and he will make us new in spirit.
This clip comes from the channel of Frank Turek, the hyper-conservative evangelical Christian apologist who I've responded to more than anyone else. If you've seen any of his content or even any of my responses to him, you can probably guess how he responds to yet another charge that his rhetoric is harmful.
Well, Mav, let me ask you a question. What is your standard of morality?
I'm myself, I'm a secular humanist. I think that everybody is innately good.
What do you mean by good?
Well, obviously murder is wrong.
Why?
Because if I went and murdered someone's kid, then that mother or father would not have a child and they would be in mourning, and that caused them some great psychological turmoil for the rest of their lives and trauma they're going to have to work through in therapy. So objectively, we can see psychologically, they're not going to be doing too hot. So of course,
but
that's objectively wrong.
Why is it objectively wrong to harm people?
Yeah, this is what Frank Turek always says when someone claims he's hurting people. It sets him up to play what he and his fans consider his trump card.
You're importing a moral standard into your atheistic system, and you're stealing it from a theistic worldview. There is no objective moral standard unless some kind of God exists. Everything is just a matter of human opinion.
Turek reasons, no moral standard exists without the God of the Bible, so you can't make any moral claim about me unless it's founded on my God. This is a pretty brilliant move, rhetorically, as it appears to defeat any non-Christian's claim that Turek has behaved unethically. Of course, I could point out that even if his God's objective moral standard exists, all humans still have to interpret that standard and how to apply it through their own subjective perception. This renders all moral deliberation among humans as nothing but what he calls one opinion against another. I'm not here to argue Turek's point on this, though, because if we continue watching this clip, we see Turek state a moral position of his that makes this conversation a whole lot more interesting.
And so when you hold up a sign that says that certain people have treated LGBTQ people wrongly,
Well, they have, and there's so much evidence for it.
Mav, you might be exactly right about that. But
I
you
know
need-
I am. I have experiences and data to back it up.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that people have treated you poorly, but
You don't have to go on and spread these bigoted viewpoints on YouTube and Facebook like you do. It's just a bunch of misinformation. You have no idea. You have blood on your hands.
Okay, Mav. Do you want to have a conversation, or you just want
No, I really just would like you to just apologize and turn around and see that what you're doing is harmful.
Mav, there's only harm if God exists. Harm is only evil if God exists. And so you're
There's harm
stealing.
regardless if God exists or not.
Thank you, Mav. You're not interested. Thank you for coming. I think that, yes, people who identify as LGBTQ have been treated poorly. But I also think now that Christians are being treated poorly. And both of them are wrong. We ought to respect people even if we disagree with them.
Frank is right here when he proposes that God must exist for objective moral values to exist. There have been many attempts to, under naturalism, consolidate objective moral values with a secular naturalist view. Sam Harris is one of the major proponents of this, where he created a book called The Moral Landscape, in which he proposes a landscape of wellness and well-being, in which he admits at the end of the book, on one of the last pages, that if psychopaths are able to cohabitat with good people at the peak of wellness on the spectrum, then that would invalidate his moral landscape and make it a well-being landscape. And so that is the best that atheist naturalists have done with this topic. And so he is strictly correct here. But I do think he could have posed a better answer to this question. Even though his statement is strictly correct, he needs to more directly address the question that's being asked of him, as opposed to pivoting to objective morality and how naturalists steal objective moral values from Christianity to demonize Christianity. But that's something we're going to get into in part 2. This is going to be the end of this one, and I hope you guys stick around, and we're going to really dive into the rest of this, where the meat and potatoes is at, and really kind of break down what his responses are and how Genetically Modified Skeptic views those.